Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
So Logan, as you alluded to offline, there's a lot of rumour and innuendo occurring, and certainly there is. We don't normally tackle it head on, and I don't think we're going to tackle it head on just yet, because this is more like a taster of what's to come probably next week, because we should find out the official line, which means all the speculation and bollocks can go away. But essentially, at the very top end, there was rumours swirling a few weeks ago that there's going to be certain select Xbox games coming to PlayStation, and it got people's backs up. Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves were kind of speculated upon. It didn't really cause too much noise. We completely ignored it because I was like, well, we'll just see, because it's not really a big deal. I mean, Hi-Fi Rush, you know, well regarded from last year, like quite recent, but a smaller title. I think it's it wasn't one of their big kind of hitters. At least it wasn't one of their planned big hitters, because it came out of nowhere and shadow dropped. So it wasn't something they'd kind of marketed and was making it to be a big deal. Now, when it dropped, it became something, and people did enjoy it. Me and you excluded, seemingly, from that party. And then you got Sea of Thieves, which is 6, maybe 7 years old. And I was just like, well, no, that's a non-point, really. It's Sea of Thieves. Like, it's good. I've played and spent plenty of time on it, but it's not like a big title. It's not like a modern big title that you'd feel like, oh, that's really eyebrow raising, because it's also a live service. So again, chuck it on everywhere and see what sort of money you can get. But anyway, this past week, and over the past weekend, so the weekend before, if people listen to this on the public feed, freeloaders, there was rumours swirling about other games, and really the big one that caught my eye was when Starfield was mentioned. I was like, that was last year's big one for all intents and purposes. That was Xbox's generational 2023. Here's the new start. Restart the generation. We're starting from now, Phil said. And Indiana Jones was mentioned as well, which is, got some other complexities because it's a Marvel or a Disney property. It is Disney, isn't it, nowadays?
Yeah, Disney,
But all of Lucas's stuff, not Marvel, which are owned by Disney, obviously. It's a Disney property. So that had speculation that one day that might appear, but it wasn't announced in that way. Gears of War has since been mentioned. And anyway, the lid started coming off, and people were basically making the assumption that everything potentially could go third party, that Xbox are going to leave the console. All this sort of meltdown happening. There were victory flags being flown by the Blue Bloods. The Green Bloods really didn't know what to do. It was a state of absolute disarray from their perspective, and it was good to see people punished in that way. I say that to say that we don't actually know what the official line is, so actually speculating on those particular items is probably stupid of us, because we'll get caught out in 7 days or so. But here's what Phil said, finally chimed in. Normally he's on the buzzer, shutting things down and, disaster management, doing all that sort of stuff. Quote, "We're listening and we hear you." Who? Which side? The screaming Green Bloods crying, or the celebratory Blue Bloods going, "Go on, port all the games." Anyway, we're listening and we hear you. "We've been planning a business update event next week where we look forward to sharing more details with you about our vision for the future of Xbox, Stay tuned." End quote. And it wasn't anywhere close to the quote because I bollocksed it up, but that's what Phil said. So with all this there, and probably what you've read and other speculation and nonsense, and obviously the memes have been flowing, which have been one of my favourite parts of this whole entire process, is seeing the jokes coming out. What was Phil's famous quote? "When everyone plays, we all win." I'm like, well, maybe you meant that literally now, which is quite funny. But what's your temperature check? Do you think there's much credence to these reports? Do you think Phil's neutral comment on "we'll update something next week, update you next week with something, but there's no denial there," suggests that there could be a bit more smoke without fire? But what's your high level temperature check? Is this going to be a defining moment in the industry? Because should the reports be believed and the theories, if everything does end up going third party, that would be a big change. But What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no smoke without fire, right? Like, generally speaking, and when there is smoke without fire, it gets shut down quickly. So it'd be really easy for Phil to come out and go, "This is all bollocks. It ain't happening. Go away." But he ain't done that. So you can normally tell by what the reaction is, what the news will be, and it looks like. I mean, I don't know whether they'd do a Starfield. I don't know whether that's the initial short-term thing to do. But look, I think it's pretty obvious for a while the direction of travel Microsoft have been going with this, right? You don't buy arguably the biggest developer and publisher in the world, and I think when you looked at that acquisition, what they did and how they positioned everything with Call of Duty and multi-platform stuff would have been interesting, right? Because if their goal was to further monopolize the console industry, they'd be pretty quickly coming out trying to make sure that was clear in terms of these are going to be Xbox exclusive games, right? And they didn't. They've done the opposite.
Well, on that point, I just assumed that that's because of the pressure they got from regulators, FTC, Sony, that they were trying to appease them, thinking, okay, well, look, we didn't really want to do this, but we're going to have to get these fucks off our back. But I wonder whether now they were like, well, we're going to do it anyway, and no skin off our nose. Someone's run the numbers, and Alan said, not really bothered. But it's
so I mean, my
one way or another, they were going to be publishing a lot more games on PlayStation by virtue of the acquisition.
And I think the way that they've built out Game Pass, and I think we've talked about this semi-frequently on this podcast, how they're building up this big library.
Regurgitating
content, which is the easiest way of making money. If we did make money, that would be nice. But
got a new patron last night.
Wow.
And I sent you the stats, didn't I? The charts. 7th in South Korea for gaming and hobbies or something.
Do they understand what we're saying?
No. Although look, a lot of the other podcasts seem to have some sort of English language. They're not all. They didn't look Korean, at least to my eye. So maybe there's a. I don't know about these countries who learns English, but I feel like a lot of them, out of necessity, like other countries, just learn English just to be included.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, in the world.
So thank you for that,
world. Yeah.
Call the Empire bad. Bloody hell. Gave them that.
My overriding view is that they've been positioning Game Pass as the way that they're taking their business model. Like, when you think about the fact that and I don't want to go on a long rant about this, and I'll keep it relatively short, but the fact that they've stopped really selling Microsoft exclusives, they've completely disincentivized the reason to buy their games, because they're all day one. And I know that's a controversial
day 5.
Yeah, part for you. But day one, essentially, they're available to download using that. Like, the direction of travel has been semi-clear, or at least indicative for a while of where you think they might go. And they're obviously just going to start packaging up games in this subscription service. And then, medium to long term, the idea is, I'm not sure whether they'll actually come out of the console game altogether. At least in the short term, they won't do that. They'll continue to support the Xbox. But I wonder if they're thinking next gen onwards, is this the time when we go and speak to Jim and co and say, look, this is how we're doing it. Do you want to buy it, yes or no? And how much you're going to and start actually selling the product that they've got, rather than.
You mean, and by products you mean Game Pass?
Yeah. And it's basically Microsoft being a subscription service. I mean, a lot of their stuff, right? The Microsoft business model used to be able to buy Office, used to be able to buy this and that. It's just a subscription service. Like, their whole model at Microsoft has been built largely now in terms of software around subscriptions, like using Teams for organizations and all that kind of stuff. And their share price has absolutely rocketed. Like, if you bought Microsoft 5 years ago, their share price has gone through the roof.
And 5 years ago, they'd gone, that's way too high. It can't keep going up.
Yeah. So
it can.
You look at it and you go, well, everyone will be going, oh, but I like my console and this, that, and the other. It's like, actually, for me personally, this is excellent news. I'll take this because it means I can get rid of this box. I'll have a PC, I'll have a PlayStation, I can play Game Pass on a console or on my PC, and I don't have to have this third wheel, if you like. But we're one or 2 steps ahead of that. I think it will be some form of business update, but I think they'll remain committed and draw that line to the console. But long term, the gut feel looks to me like they won't, or they're not. I don't feel like that's their direction of travel. It's the complete opposite to what Sony are doing, really.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. There's no smoke without fire. The lack of outright denial is there. I don't know if it's going to be as nuclear as what has been squabbled at throughout the various gaming circles. I do tend to think it won't be everything. Here's what I would like next week, or this week, I guess, is the freebies listen. In the short and the medium term, I'm not going to say long term because who the hell knows? I don't be dictating strategies for businesses long term because it's no point. They won't listen anyway. Just some sort of commitment to the Xbox as a hardware platform. Because there are people that have been there since, could argue the 360s when they started doing digital games. They kind of introduced that as an option. And then Xbox One was more prevalent, and obviously the Series X. And I'm talking in generational terms, not necessarily those boxes, but more and more people buying games on a digital front. Because if you remove the ability for them to, on a future kind of platform, play those, I think that's going to be a headache for them to deal with optically wise. Now, you could argue that, they could just keep their current box and, forever, but that stuff don't last forever. It always breaks down eventually. So something like that, have some sort of foot there, even if it's just Series S type going forward, like we're going to do a lower powered, cheaper machine. That's not even a terrible way of doing it. But some sort of commitment that they're not going to exit the hardware platform imminently to quell people squabbling. Because I think as soon as you there's two reasons why. One, it's not good for those people that are invested in that ecosystem, but also you wave that flag of potentially exiting, and then what's the point in even bothering from now onwards buying anything to do with Xbox? Like, it's going to go away. So you immediately bottom out your future growth. You completely concede it. So I think it's important they just confirm that. I think that's well within their plans. Long term, as you suggested, perhaps not, but short to medium, you say, look, we're seeing this generation off and we're planning on something next generation. Something like that would do. And you're like, okay, you've got a bit of time here. The second thing, and really the most important thing, is I want absolute clear messaging on what they're up to. I know this is like impossible to ask of Microsoft, but this is what I'd like. What are you doing and how are you going to do it? If games are going third party, I want to know which ones. I don't want to hear this case by case basis bollocks again, because we've had that before. And then people, every time something's announced, is it going to PlayStation? Is it just go, look, at some point everything is going over to the other platforms where it's technically possible. So you cut your losses with the Switch if that becomes a problem. But you say where technically possible, the games are going. Now there's going to be at least a 12-month lag on our exclusive, on our in-house products and stuff from our other publishers that we own now, whether it be Bethesda, whether it be Activision, Blizzard, whatever you go. But something along those lines where you as an Xbox consumer can say, okay, I understand where I stand. I understand that I'm going to get access to these earlier. I understand also by owning the Xbox, I've got access to Game Pass, which allows me to play it at a very competitively priced place. And also, if you are going to start to branch out to PlayStation and consider them as your future customers, it would be handy for them to know when to expect things roughly. And what games to expect. You go for this case by case bollocks and you don't win anyone over because everyone's looking at each other going, what's happening next? Ideally, it's everything is eventually going over just to cut through that bollocks. Then I think it gives a consumer of all platforms a reasonable position to sit there and go, okay, for me, I'm not going to buy the box because I don't need to, which is fine. They're still going to get their money off me a year later. Or if you're an Xbox player, like, okay, fine. I know that I've got this period, this window where I'll be first. And like I said, I've got access to Game Pass for as cheap as you'll get. Basically, by the end of this thing, I want to be able to nod my head and have to have very little follow-up and questions other than like the analysis of what they've announced. No ambiguity. Is that too much to ask, do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a load of ambiguity about it. There
Why has
always
it got to
is.
be though? Just
Because they want people talking about it. Like, if there's no ambiguity, there'd be no controversy. There'd be no.
sounds like WWE. This Codium Rock thing. They've U-turned on it because of the fans.
So, I expect there'll be some ambiguity. I think they'll remain committed, or they'll state they remain committed to the Xbox in some form or to hardware.
They have to say that even if they don't mean it.
Yeah, so they have to say that. I wouldn't put any. They won't put a time frame on it, and they won't say to what extent. I think that what you've outlined is probably where they'll go with it in the short term, which is it will go to other platforms, but you'll get Game Pass. I don't think Game Pass will immediately go to PlayStation, for example.
Well, I think that's more to do with Sony saying don't need it or don't want it on our. We don't want it.
Well, yeah, I mean,
because they'll make what 30% of a tenner a month, and it's probably for them. Again, we talked about last week how they wipe their ass with lower amounts of money. They might not want to give them a foothold there because they're trying to push their own subscription
games and things.
But,
yeah.
I mean, it is
so that in the short term at least is probably not going to be a goer. But I think what they would do is say to, like, after 2 years, say, like, is it really that? Like, once they've got most of their sales out of the way, is it really that impossible for it to go to PlayStation? They already do it for PC or whatever, or selling games to like. So
it's already been there for years now, and everyone got over that eventually, got over themselves, and said, "Oh yeah, there is a reason to own an Xbox." It's like, "Oh yeah, of course there is. There's always a reason. If you prefer the controller, it might be as simple as that. Like, it doesn't have to be this whole
ease of use.
The ease of use. You might.
There is some benefit, but it's not going to be a case of like universal benefit anymore. And I think that's, you're seeing that more and more. Like Joe Rogan's podcast has just been moved back to Apple, and they're hoping to get it all back on YouTube. Yeah. Like, because everyone's like, I'm better off getting 10% of something than 0% of nothing.
Does that mean that Spotify have now got an open for a brand new podcast to fund like ours?
Possibly. So
do we know anyone?
I mean, no. It's a problem. But there's an open avenue. But I think he's still partnered with Spotify. So he's still...
Right.
They're still funding it, but it's not exclusive, which is interesting. But I
that
think
is weird. That is strange. Because Spotify and Apple Music... All I see these days is when there's a new song coming out, they're the two platforms they mention. It's going to Apple Music and Spotify on the assumption that's where most people are. Yeah. So I'm shocked that they would Spotify. Would be like, let's allow it to go on there as well and not just keep it exclusive. Maybe they've seen that it's not really moving number. I mean, it seemed like an absurd amount of money for.
It was crazy money.
A long form podcast that he churns out 3 or 4 of those a week, and what's that? 12 hours of.
Yeah.
You sit there listening to that every week.
I think I've listened to about a handful, like all the way through, because they're too yeah. Like, they're too long. Like, who's got that sort of time to invest generally, unless it's something that, or someone or something that you're super into. But yeah, I think there's something else I was going to reference as well. I can't remember what it is now, but generally, like, this ecosystem of like separate things, you see more things coming together, I think is kind of where I'm going at, because there's a combined benefit for doing that. And I just think it's kind of the way things are going to go. But you'll get your games on day one, Game Pass on a console, and then perhaps 2 years, 12 months, 18 months down the line, they'll release it to other platforms. It's like, fine. Like, I got nothing against doing that. But it's like people want to be super territorial. And I find it ironic, really, that, people talk about things like Microsoft, like, oh, they're not shifted enough, or they've lost the race to PlayStation. And it's ironic for me that what Xbox are trying to do is sell their games, because it's actually, in my perspective, it's the games that drive the console sales. Yeah. Right? Like, and you could argue that PlayStation haven't released a whole lot of games this generation and go through that, but the back catalogue of games from the past sort of 5 years on PlayStation that you can play is so much better than Xbox and Microsoft, like, by far. And with the advent of cross-play being widely available now and all that kind of stuff, like, the incentive to be on a console because your mates play Call of Duty on that or whatever is just gone. Yeah. Like, it's not a thing now. So when I look at a console, I've always historically bought the Xbox before the PlayStation. I think next gen, obviously I've got a PC now, but I would be the other way round. I would be getting the PlayStation before an Xbox.
Yeah.
And I think that's largely because of the games, right? And then you've got Microsoft that are trying to sell their games now to a console. It's just a bit of a weird, ironic situation for me. I mean, they've got good games, but they haven't got a whole set of great games that you can play in recent memory. But look, I think it's an interesting development. And the one concern that I would have before we probably look to move on from this is
he's hosting it
Microsoft.
now.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm making the decisions, but I'm just trying to not labour. We said we're not going to discuss it until next week, and we've gone to discuss it for 25 minutes.
Yeah.
But essentially, it's just competition. Like I've always found that having multiple consoles, at least competing, kind of keeps everyone in check a little bit in terms of cost, pricing, offering.
That's why I kind of wanted them to make some sort of medium-term commitment as well.
Yeah.
Just because, you're right. Because if they would theoretically exit from hardware, that leaves the Switch basically and Sony. Now the Switch is doing its own thing. It's not doing this high-powered, high-priced comparatively. Even though the Switch wasn't that cheap, actually. I think people forget that it is now, but it's fucking...
Yeah. It's about 300 and something
It's
quid,
320 quid, yeah.
Yeah.
How much were those? I think those consoles were either 4 or 450. Anyway,
yeah,
not getting involved. But essentially, you kind of leave the market open to one high quote-unquote powered console. PC boys having a laugh at that one. And then they're kind of, well, why not make it 600? If there's no one there just to have an alternative that's comparative to bring the price down. So that's why I think it's important they, at least, even if it's a fleeting effort, just do it. And again, you don't have to sell it at such a, a price that you're losing money hand over fist. But there needs to be something there to stop those greedy bastards from just ramping up the price and saying, well, no one's going to stop us.
I mean, the thing is, though, Microsoft have been pricing their console below PlayStation throughout this gen, as far as I can see. And
they were the same, but they had the S, which was below it, but it was a lower power,
lower spec,
yeah.
But PlayStation has still sold them like comparatively like hotcakes. Like it hasn't really mattered, and I don't think that the PlayStation's been priced to be. And this is kind of where it's interesting, is because the market will dictate as well. Like you look at the Switch and you go, well, it's out there doing its own thing.
Yeah, it's running right.
It's running right.
That's going to be the most sold console ever at some point. Like in my eyes, that will clip the PS2 either this year or next year, certainly, even if the Switch 2 comes out this year. So it'll go down in history for that.
Yeah, I mean, so it's been out there doing its thing, and it's always been a bit of a, well, at least since they sort of created the Wii, it's kind of just been out there on its own, doing its own thing, and it priced at its own price, no real competitor, and we haven't seen that go up to £800 or whatever. So the market will kind of dictate anyway what people are willing to pay. But I do think sometimes just having another option somewhere is always good. Options are always good.
Yeah.
Right.
Just keep these fucks honest.
Generally are not. Yeah. Keep them as honest as possible.
Yeah, they're not going to be honest, but yeah.
But I think that'd be my one concern, is how does anyone else come along and try and do something a bit different and offer something like? I think that's what's interesting, is does it, because Apple have always been sniffing around this market and they've struggled to find a way in. Like, could Microsoft coming out a little bit, give them a different angle of a way in?
I see a lot of fear about Apple saying, "Oh, don't want them entering the console market. They don't know what they're doing." And I was like, I sort of went, well, fair enough. I don't really follow much of what Apple are up to, and that Apple Vision, absurd as it is, may well be something in 20 years that everyone's got. Who the hell? I didn't think these touch phones, smartphones were going to be all that, and then now look where we are.
Yeah.
But then I look back and I was like, well, Microsoft previously, when they started up, yes, they had Microsoft Flight Simulator. They had a little bit of a footprint in gaming, but kind of similar in that it's big now multi-trillion-dollar company is going to come along and they don't know anything about gaming. Really, they tried to buy Nintendo outright. All this bollocks that happened, and yet they've had a decent run of 20-odd years, and it might go beyond this anyway. They may not be gone completely, but I think, why can't Apple be like that? Why are they such a terrible influence when Microsoft would have been seen as that and actually weren't too bad, I don't think, in the long term. We've had some good innovations for them, achievements, Xbox Live, digital games store. Like, there's all this stuff they've done, accessibility controller that they've implemented through being in this space that, I don't know, maybe Apple are just more nefarious in some ways, but I've seen a lot of people like going, "Oh, we don't want them involved." And I'm like, well,
what have they done? A lot of people don't
have a
like
go.
them.
Yeah.
Because they go, "This is our ecosystem, and you have to buy into it." And their products are horrendous.
Sounds like a PlayStation to me.
Well, they offer a premium product, premium service, and I'm not going to say it's great value because I think those iPhones cost them about £2.50 to make or something. They sell them for over £1,000. Like, the markup on them's horrific. But I think what they do, Apple, and what they have historically done is take a concept and make it marketable and desirable.
Yeah.
And they do some innovation, like iTunes, and they tend to bring concepts to the masses in a way that makes everything kind of make sense, and they're pretty good at doing it, right? They come out with some funky stuff, as you say. They come out with the iPhone, and everyone's a bit like, "I want buttons," and it kind of just took a little bit of time to get some traction. And now everything is basically an iPhone clone. Yeah. Really, is what it is. They do some good stuff. Macs are super desirable. iPads, like, they've done all this stuff, and you think, what could they bring? iPod, yeah. Listen to music that way. I mean, they've done some great stuff, but I don't know whether I sometimes wonder whether the good days are behind them in terms of like that sort of innovation, because they lost the key man that was behind it, sort of thing. But they've still got a huge amount of resources and everything to put behind it if they can see there is an avenue for them. You'd probably think at the moment with Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft, you go, what's there for us? What sort of market share is there? Like, they've obviously done a look at it and decided not to, and you just wonder whether they might be looking at it a little bit, going, now might be our chance, sort of not now, but within the next 5 to 10 years. But don't know. Interesting, though.
All you're after is a chance. Maybe that's what they see. A little chance to get involved. But I guess we'll find out more in the coming days as this.
It needs a fucking shake up, doesn't it? I think sometimes it's good to, everyone goes, "Oh, change, I don't like." Sometimes it's good, right? Like, you had Sega, you've had all these different things that have come and gone with consoles, and they're still doing stuff just under a different guise. Someone goes, someone comes in, and that's the way it goes. And if Sega was still around and doing what they were doing, would we have had all the advents that Microsoft brought along? So I think, look, it's just the way it goes. People come and go, different ideas, different things to do. And I think if Microsoft do decide a long-term shift in what they're doing, then I'm sure it'll open the door for someone else to do something a bit different. So might not be a bad thing.
No, I guess we'll find out more from what Phil and Co have got to say, and whether it's clear and concise. I guess we'll find out. Do they do a video of Phil and Co standing there trying to explain it, or is it just like a blog post on like Microsoft blog or Xbox Wire, or how do they do
someone
this?
Talking? I don't know. I was thinking it would be like a keynote thing. I don't know. I think it would be some sort of like verbal,
with a follow-up blog with supporting information, the detail of it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't really know, because they've probably been. I don't know whether they've been caught off guard with this stuff.
The other rumour was that they were planning to do this either in spring, which I don't know when spring starts nowadays. It feels like it's spring now, the temperature, and it's pissing down with rain, or late February. So if you take late February is what they were planning to, they felt like they've had to bring it forward because of the leaks getting out and the response.
They do this stuff deliberately to temper the market and see what it does to the share price and all that kind of stuff. Like, they're not inadvertent leaks usually with these announcements. They chuck it to someone and they go, "Get this out." Conspiracy
theories are that there's a bit of a civil war going on. You've got Phil and his gaming lot who don't want this vision to happen because they feel like for Game Pass to work, you kind of, now they've got everything in place. Now's the time to buckle down and say, no, this stuff's staying here for now. You come over, and then you get involved in Game Pass, and that builds the vision. Whereas bean counters and Satya and the top brass, I think the CFO, something Stuart, his name is, they're all like, well, we've invested this money and now we want returns on it. Yeah. So what's the easy way to return? Let's have a look and see what Activision did for us once we put them over. Fuck me, look at that money it makes on other platforms. Okay. So the rumour is that someone on the gaming side who doesn't want this vision to become concrete started to leak stuff. This is tinfoil hat shit, isn't it? But leaked it out to,
I'm here for it.
You know, get the controversy and try and say, look, there's a load of crybabies basically that don't want this to happen. And it's kind of forced the hand in some stage. A lot of people say this is really going to drive the Microsoft share price down. I was like, no, it's not. Like, Xbox is like the third or fourth thing in there. If they said, look, Windows and Office is going away because we're shutting it down, that would. But Xbox looking to make more money when they're probably responsible for like 20 cents of every dollar that's Microsoft. It's not a problem for them.
No, I mean, I think actually what this would do is drive the share price up.
Yeah.
Because it would largely drive an increase in revenue, which would therefore be a good thing.
Exactly. So for what cost? You know,
no cost.
A tiny bit of like porting costs for each game. But you've done the hard work on these games anyway, so... Well,
the thing is, if you stream it through cloud or something anyway, like, it don't even have to... This is what I mean. It's like when you actually look at what the solution could be... it's interesting, and I think this is where I start to talk about Apple, because if you see Microsoft Game Pass app on an Apple iPhone being streamed to the TV you start putting the pieces together of how that actually works, and you go, well, is that the model, not today necessarily, but is that the model of 5-10 years down the line, rather than having this fucking great big box sitting here? Like, I think that's the way that they're looking at it.
Yeah. I want my box.
That's the trouble, though, is you're fighting against the 1% that want the box.
Yep.
And the 1% are the loudest. And I like the box. I like the convenience of turning it on. I like the hardware being with me because it's reliable. But I don't know. I still don't think the long-term requirement is to have hardware. I think in a lot of ways, it used to be, you look at companies now and they had data centers, whopping great big data centers. They don't fucking want it now. They don't want the cost of running it. They don't want the cost of maintaining it. They just have cloud storage, and they whack it all on the cloud that way. And that's the way things are going. Then
they'll start building all these cloud farms, and they'll go, that's fucking expensive now.
Well, it's already doing it, but they sell the cloud, don't they? There's a cost to it. It's a subscription model,
fucking air. That's what they're doing, robbers.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, I'm not wholly surprised to see it. I don't think there's going to be an immediate shift, but I think long term, it feels like there will be some kind of shift.
Well, if they come out and nothing's changed, they say, we're not doing anything, sorry, bye.
They'll be fucking lying, because they're always doing something, aren't they?
Fucking about.
And I think the writing's semi on the wall. But we'll see. I think it's, as I say, I kind of welcome a periodic shake-up. We've had this duopoly for 20, 25 years now, and it's like I'd actually kind of welcome something meaningful to shake it up a little bit, whatever that might be.
We will see. Anyway, this is Idle Game Chat, Dimp Digital's flagship video game podcast, 34 minutes into the podcast. Got apps here and the FGL Grand Prix winner, Logan, to talk through whatever we decide is relevant for the week of video games. Now, I don't know if this is going to show on the... Oh, it does. It's kind of a bit blurry, but this... Well, that was always going to be a concern with this. But essentially, someone sent us some fan mail. Cartoon Tom sent us he called... His own words were, it's the Blue Peter version of the Sniffometer. Now, is that what we agreed on in terms of the terminology?
Just reading it.
Was it the Sniffometer or the Sniffometer or...
I always find it interesting when people put tut as a TUT.
Well,
So I look
in his
at it-
note, he did write this and say, I've put it as tut, but I think you spell it as T-O-O-T. And I was like, I don't think there's a library, a fucking dictionary term for it. So,
Digital dictionary of terms, yeah.
yeah. So we've got the forthcoming of Christ, we've got Bollard Tickler, you've got Core, you've got Lurking, you've got Wow, you've got Tut, you've got load of old Tut, and then just Blower at the bottom on the
It's
Sniffometer.
pretty bang on, to be fair.
I know, it is.
I can't actually say that I think there's anything that I'd change about it. And we use those terms. I don't think I've ever used the term Ballard Tickler before,
That's
but that looks like
Adkins.
an Adkins. Yeah.
That's an Adkins fucking Bollard fucking Tickler.
The forthcoming of Christ is your one, I think. Where you always
I think we're
say,
on 4, aren't we?
yeah. after Elden Ring.
Yeah, because we had.
Oh no, Zelda.
Breath of the Wild was the second coming of Christ, and then Elden Ring was the third coming. So we are on the fourth coming of Christ.
Yeah, so it's pretty good though. Does it go?
Yeah.
I assume the triangle goes up and down.
Yeah, you can sort of rate. So maybe we should use this as some sort of sniff because this is for games that we think that are coming out that we think could be of use.
I mean, if I was going to be overly critical, I'd ask for that to be on wood, but it's still really good.
Yeah, no, it's very good. It is just a bit of cardboard, but it's laminated at least. So
yeah, I know, and it's 3D because the Dimp nose, by the looks of it, is a second layer of
it's stuff and the triangle. It's got some depth to it as well.
That is way beyond my creative skill, I think. But I like it. I think we should use that as when we're talking about games where it sits on the Sniffometer.
So what is it? Is it Sniffometer? Is that the right spelling for your Sniffometer, or do you want dashes in it, or what?
I've just said it's a Sniffometer. I don't like Sniffometer because that's a very American. Do you know what I mean?
Lazy English.
You go, it's a thermometer. You don't go, it's a thermometer. Yes. So that's why I go, it's a Sniffometer, not a Sniffometer.
Yeah. It's very good though. Is that the right spelling then?
I don't know. Yeah, it's about as good. That's what I'd do it as. Sniffometer, Sniffometer. I'm happy with that.
All right, we'll sign that.
I like it though.
It's very good. Well, let's put it to use now, shall we?
Go on. Yeah.
Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was out actually on our last recording, but there were no reviews.
Yeah.
Now it's sitting on a 59, which is a disaster for Biff.
Well, really, that's a 69.
Well, yes, I do. I do tend to think that it's not a 59 really in real life, but they made their mind up before the game came out, so it's never going to get anything higher. So it's a 69 in real money, as we'd say. But it's not good for Biff's fantasy gaming league. A sub 60 can't help him.
I don't know what he was thinking.
No, nor do I. But that's how the boy operates. We've got here. Let's read this review. I've got a 6 out of 10, which is roughly what it's doing, what it's sort of lurking at. The Sixth Axis, Gareth Chadwick. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is a perfect example of how live services can sap all the energy out of a game experience. The story, the character, and gameplay all range from good to fantastic, but the missions grow stale before long. The loot system's few bright spots are tarnished by the chore of everything else you earn, and the story and characters all but evaporate once you reach the end game. So, not happy with this live service implementation, which I think was always going to happen. Are you surprised? I'm not surprised at all by where this has ended up, really. I think it's probably a tiny bit lower than I expected, but I always knew it was going to have a hard time because no one wanted it. And it's interesting to kind of read and see people's opinions. Is that the general consensus is that, listen to this, Metro, the AI's done it again, no name. 4 out of 10 they gave it. The combat is good and the script has its moments. But otherwise, it's a highly repetitive open world shooter that makes very poor use of its license. But again, the core combat is seemingly getting some level of praise. Yeah. And again, it's just been... Well, look, we know this is partly because it's Rocksteady and the affinity people have of the Arkham games. They wanted another Arkham type game and they got this, the game they didn't want. So that's damaged it. But are you surprised by this at all, really? I guess is the top level question.
No, I mean, look, I think it's not just the game. It's not the game that the critics wanted, and I don't think it's really the game that anyone wanted from them, or just from any studio. Like, I don't think it's even. I get what you're saying that they did that, but it's like if someone else did this, would I have wanted it? Like, no.
But you wouldn't have actively hated it. Like if fucking Epic came out and said, "Oh, we're going to do a Suicide Squad,"
I know what you mean.
People would have gone, "All right, I won't play it, but I'm not going to get on the fucking bandwagon and start pulling it down."
I mean, let's be honest, it didn't look good. Like when we all saw it last year, we all went, like alarm bells were ringing. Yeah. But I always wondered how they would make this I think there was a concept there, and they've gone down this. They've artificially tried to make it live service, and I just don't like. Even when we played The Division, I think there's all this. Does it need that? Like, it's just a way of artificially trying to keep players in, and I just don't think it largely. Everyone wants to get on the gravy train. I think that's the problem. Yeah. So you try and shoehorn popular titles into this model that don't want or need it. And I think largely whenever any of the superhero games have been good, Spider-Man, Batman, like they've been solo experiences that give you 20, 30, 40 hours. What about the
Avengers? Another blower.
And this is what I mean. It just doesn't... I think the idea is that, we'd get 4 of us from Dimp, we'd all be a superhero, and we'd go roaring around and we'd have a great time.
I've called King Shark.
In practice, it doesn't work, does it? Like, no. And I'm just not that surprised. I think, the combat can be good, but I do wonder, like, how does that looting work? Like, where's the... Like, surely a character has their weapons and their powers, and then that is the environment that you operate in for them. Like, do you know what I mean? I think it's an interesting one. I mean, I think if we played it, we'd probably go, this is okay. Like, have an okay
sat through
time.
The Division 2 and its various offerings. So, I mean, if you can get through that, you think this can't be far. I imagine it feels like that for people. They're starting to realise that if you play... when you play these sort of co-op games and you find they are just soulless, and
that's how we described The Division. Like, we just said it lacks. I always think with co-op games, there's got to be something inherently fun about them. I know that's a really obvious thing to say, but like, there's got to be like the thing that's kept Destiny going is that the gameplay is incredibly solid and good and fun to do, like, and the guns can be interesting. There's a way to do that, like, that is interesting. The rest of it is largely not, right? And there's a puzzle element that is also sometimes interesting, but then when you go back to others, like, what's interesting, like Fortnite is a bit stupid, and they've got loads of variety, and there's like, you can play it kind of how you want, but it's just fun, like. And then people have taken games that aren't inherently fun, and like, there's no story, there's no real good, fun gunplay. And you go, well, what is there to this other than just the mechanics? And I think that's sometimes really difficult to replicate. But I think 6 to 7 out of 10 is roughly where I saw this game, and it's got crapped on, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's dragged Biff's average down. So he's got a 90, an 87, a 59, a 74. So he's on an average of 78, which isn't terrible, but he needs to... It's now left other games to do a lot of heavy lifting. This is what the trouble with that is. You can't get away with just good.
Not these days.
Not these days, it seems. But we'll see how it plays out. I mean, so we've got Last of Us Part 2 Remastered 90, Prince of Persia Lost Crown 87, Suicide Squad 59, and then there's another code recollection at 74. He's got things like Rise of the Ronin, the Tomb Raider remastered jobbies that are coming out, Open Roads, Pacific Drive. I mean, it's put him in a bit of a tricky position. He's got to hope what happens last year is that everyone ends up dropping a bollock and has a 60-odd rated game, which might happen. Everyone seemed to fall into that trap last year, and it gave people opportunities. But, that's Suicide Squad, kind of where we expected it to fall. Now, another game that's in the Grand Prix, which is on Adkins' squad, is Helldivers 2. It's out now. PlayStation published. Arrowhead developers. No reviews are out. So they didn't hand this one out early doors. The excuse being that it's a online, it's a PvE game, a proper, not one that you can even play solo, I don't think, because it's so hard. It's one of those ones that requires a level of, cooperation. But that's the excuse that's been drawn out now. You can make your own decisions on whether you think that's of got any credence to it, or if they're trying to hide something. We'll find out probably by next episode what the score's roughly going to be. It's getting mixed reviews on Steam due to crashes, pay to win, and anti-cheat DRM. So that's not a good sign. But on the flip side of the coin, Helldivers 2 did top the Steam charts, beating Power World and Counter-Strike 2. So a lot of people jumped into it. Whether they were happy once they did is another question. But certainly it's not completely flopped out of the gates. But this will be judged on its tail because it's set up to be one of those service-type games. So now we're going to use the Sniffometer here, because we haven't got really much of a guidance on what it's going to be. Where are you going to put this on your Sniffometer? Helldivers 2. You got the Forthcoming of Christ, the Bollard Tickler, Core. Is it just lurking? Is it toot, load of old toot, or a complete blower?
See, I find this difficult because for me, I'm not going to play it. So it's technically blower. That doesn't mean the game will be a blower. But my Sniffometer, it's a blower. I think it's probably going to be,
that's where I actually put it, because should the impossible happen, it may get played one day. I'm not ruling it out, because it actually looks like it would be good fun, but it's got so many other blows to fucking jump through. So many people have got to come along to play it. Need another three. It's unlikely that the stars are going to align, but if they did align, then I would actually sit down and maybe give this a go, but I'm not going to champion it, so therefore it gets a well.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Sony will be on the back foot as soon as the sales and the player count falls and drops, which it will. I don't see this being a resounding success, if I'm honest, but happy to be proved wrong. Resounding successes. Hogwarts Legacy officially cleared Zelda as 2023's best-selling game worldwide. The controversy did not matter in the end. The boycott did not matter, really. I mean, maybe it could have sold more, but it sold more than enough, I'd say. So outsold Tears of the Kingdom by about 1.7 million copies. And these are due to stats released from Nintendo and directly from Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment. So they both separately released sales data for them. Tears of the Kingdom 20.28 and Hogwarts Legacy got over 22 million. And they tweeted out saying this is the best-selling game of the year in the entire industry worldwide. So they're happy with that. I will say, as impressive that is for Hogwarts Legacy, well done. I mean, Zelda's no disgrace there, considering it's only available on the Switch, whereas Hogwarts Legacy was available everywhere, including the Switch by the end of the year. So, I mean, if you look at it from per capita, that Tears of the Kingdom has crapped on it, really. It's just been on a platform that's got a lot of people on it, but if it was on a PlayStation, I mean, who knows what that game would have sold?
Oh, it would have been, or
PC.
Yeah, mad. Absolutely mad. But yeah, that Hogwarts Legacy.
Were you
was
surprised
great,
by that? I mean, you played it and seemed to enjoy it, but no, you're not. He's not surprised.
I went to, topically, aware of time. Topically, I went to the Warner Brothers Studios on Wednesday this week to do like the Harry Potter studio tour, and you go there, and it really does make you realise how many people. Like, you literally booked up for 2 months in advance. Like, and there's people that come from all over the world to see that. It really is an eye-opener as to how big that franchise is. And I think we said it when the game was sort of coming out or due for release last year. Like, if they execute successfully on this game, like, it's going to be huge. And I have to say, after playing it, they did. It's a great Harry Potter game. It's the game that I always wanted from when I was a kid, back from when I played the original on the PC, and it was horrendous frame rate. Like, it's the game that I always wanted, really, in a lot of ways. And I was actually thinking I never have deleted it off of my Xbox, because I always thought
Right.
I might want to go back to that. And I after being at the studio on Wednesday, I was actually thinking about diving back into it for a bit and just having a wander around and
Clean up.
doing a few bits. Because it is. It's really good. So no, I'm not surprised by it. The audience was there. It was just a matter of whether they could release a game that people wanted, and I think they largely did.
Yeah. I mean, I still haven't got round to it, but I'll just yep it. So yeah, I'm sure.
I think if you're not a Harry Potter fan, you'll still enjoy it. But to get like the utmost enjoyment out of it, I think you've got to appreciate the whole world. In the same way, if you went and did a Harry Potter tour, you'd probably go around and go, yeah, this stuff's cool to look at. But do you really...
Yeah. Well, I did sit through all those two films, but I ain't read the book. So again, when people say, well, you're missing half the... And I'm like, well, it's never going to happen. So you're lucky to get the films out of me, including those mysterious monsters, tutters. Getting rid of Johnny Depp for Mads and not explaining that change of character. I mean, it's right. It's a wizard world, yeah. There's magic happening.
Yeah.
Why don't he just at the start in the mirror changing his look?
What, you mean like what they did for basically Doctor Who? They just
Yeah,
sort of
what they do?
They went,
Yeah.
well, he could do this. He just regenerates, and he just looks different every time. Yeah,
They
yeah.
had to backtrack
I
on
don't know.
that, haven't they? Because wasn't he supposed to only regenerate a certain amount of times, Doctor Who?
Yeah, they went, well, he can just do it.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah. I
But yeah,
know.
why
they
isn't-
just made the rules up. I know what you mean. Just explain that.
Because when that film started and I was looking at Mads, I was like, who is this?
You don't look like Johnny.
Well, I thought it was a different character. And then I was like, well, I don't know who this is. And then it took me a good half an hour. I was like, oh, it's supposed to be... I can't remember the character's name now. It's supposed to be him, isn't it?
Was that when he was going through all the shit with Amber and that, and he just couldn't...
I think, certain projects got booted off of, that's how it kind of rolls, isn't it? You get snarled up in something, even if it's good or bad, you get kicked off until it's all been cleared out, positively or negatively. But yeah, so Mads got installed, and then they never explained why he looked completely different. It's not even though they look similar. Like, it was like, who's that other bloke who doesn't look like, what's his name, Johnny Depp?
They did. Well, they did that
what's
though.
his name?
I mean, it's.
He's in extras.
What?
He's one of the.
It's
people.
one of the extras.
Yeah.
Like one of the famous people.
Yeah, and he's trying to get a date with Maggie, and she's not interested.
All I can think of is Ross Kemp.
No, it's not Ross Kemp.
No, obviously not. One thing I was going to say though, they did it with Dumbledore though in Harry Potter, and again that annoyed me. They didn't. I mean, obviously, like Richard Harris died. Like you can't do anything about that. But it was just kind of like just continued. They changed like his outfit and everything. Like they made him a different Dumbledore and just went, yeah. It's always been a bit weird for me. I've kind of just gone. I've just yepped it in my head as one of those things, but still just niggles a little bit.
What's his name?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I can't remember. What, the guy from Harry
Orlando
Potter?
Bloom.
Oh, yeah.
What I'm saying is I don't look the same, but Mads looks nothing like John. Like, there's no even, you can't even get away with it. At least like Orlando Bloom could have grown his hair out and styled it.
I think
like,
it's sometimes you just go, who else could do this character?
that's why he do the magic thing, and he just changes his look.
Yeah.
I've seen him do wilder shit in those films, so that should have been done. Anyway,
the thing is, they're constrained by the books and the stories and stuff, which is why
they make stuff as they go along half the time. They don't know what they're doing. Anyway, Hogwarts Legacy, an absolute profit maker. Also, Red Dead Redemption 2, 61 million copies sold. Second best-selling game for Rockstar.
It's unbelievable, really, isn't it?
The title takers. Anyway, that'll do for this part of Idle Game Chat. What have we got next? We are going to move on to... Let's do State of Decay 2. A surprise in the book, so people can hear about my opinion on... Maybe a game that's ported over to PlayStation one day. Who knows? I suspect that sort of stuff they won't bother with, but who knows? Phil will let us know in due course, I'm told, thanks to these business updates. But you've got State of Decay 2, which I played through a fair old bit, a few of the campaigns that were there and whatnot, and give my thoughts on that. That's it for us on this particular segment of Idle Game Chat. We will see you on the other side. Here we are then, back with some game impressions to close out this edition of Idle Game Chat. You got Apps here and Logan joining me to talk through State of Decay 2 Juggernaut Edition, which I have played. Logan definitely not playing this one because it's got Scrabblers, as he calls them, aka zombies in them.
Not my bag.
Not his bag at all. But I did recently play through State of Decay 2 Juggernaut Edition. Spent about 30 hours in it on total. And back to report my findings. So I'll hand over to Logan to see what questions he can come up with.
Store page.
Store page. Okay.
First, well, it's more of a statement that more than anything.
Yeah.
Store page, question mark?
It does have one. Here we go.
Yeah.
We've got Xbox Game Studios who published it. Undead Labs who developed it. So this is a Microsoft exclusive, I guess you'd say. It's on PC. I think it's on Steam and all that good stuff, but it's not on PlayStation. Original release date, 22nd of the 5th, 2018. So it's an old one.
Yeah.
Getting resurrected. Anyway, the dead have risen and civilization has fallen. Not even the military could stop the zombies. So they call them zombies in this. They're not afraid to. Like some games in fiction, they just go, oh, infected. Them.
That's a poor way of doing it. I like the term zombie. It's okay. It's fine to do it.
Yeah. Well, I watched World War Z the other night, and they say zombie in that. It's called World War Z, but anyway. And now it's up to you to gather survivors, scavenge for resources, and build a community with up to 3 of your friends in a post-apocalyptic world, a world where every decision matters and where you define what it means to survive in the ultimate zombie survival simulation. State of Decay 2 Juggernaut Edition reimagines the popular survival game as a brand new experience to welcome first-time players and those who have come back from the dead. This edition is packed with new and remastered content from the ultimate zombie survival experience. Join over 10 million players and discover what Juggernaut Edition has to offer. So it has the base game plus all 3 add-on packs released to date, including the all-new Homecoming update. It has remastered graphics and upgraded engine featuring realistic fog effects, expanded soundtrack with hours of new musical arrangements, Providence Ridge, a brand new open-world map full of forest zombies and mystery, 2-handed weapons with melee combat moves to bust zombie heads, a new introductory experience and improved controls to help you master the apocalypse, and countless other improvements to the classic open-ended sandbox gameplay. So there's a lot here in terms of not just that store page, but the game itself. It does...
The ultimate zombie survival experience, it says.
I mean, maybe it is. I mean, that's a low bar. Because a lot of the trash that's come out that's tried to do this isn't up to snuff.
I would say there isn't really a AAA.
This ain't AAA, forget that.
No, but this is what I'm saying. There isn't really like a benchmark in zombie survival experiences. You got Dead Island, but that's not really...
It's not a survival. No, it's a zombie game, but I mean, you're right. I mean, all the games that you kind of think of that have tried this. I mean, the big one's probably DayZ, which was a mod of Armour 2 and 3, I think, and that was an online experience.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where this is different, I guess, to a lot of the others that I've played. Is that this doesn't rely on or require online people. Now, it does say there's co-op in there. You can do that.
How do you feel about that?
What do you mean?
If I was there, coming to attack your base. No, but this is what I'm saying.
Oh, no, you wouldn't want it. No, this is the thing. It completely removes that nonsense because people that drop into your game can only help you anyway. So if you want to fire a flare up for help or whatever you do, or you want to play as a co-op, as people would say, then it's all, you're all building towards one goal. It's a PvE environment.
Yeah.
DayZ, PvPvE. So you've always got those snurks that are just out there to rob you.
Sabotage your day.
Yeah, I played another one called The War Z, which was an absolute disgrace of a game. I think it ended up being called Infestation or something eventually. I mean, a complete... that was when DayZ was getting its popularity, and that was a clear attempt to cash in on that, and I bought into it, hook, line and sinker, and it was pretty poor. I mean, again, it was online and has that dynamic, but really, you're right, there isn't really a...
So maybe it is. Maybe it's the ultimate current zombie survival experience, but
I think removing the online element just create so much less hassle for everyone involved. You haven't got to worry about the players just fucking things up.
It would have to be PvE. Whatever happens, adding the PvP element, and that would be there in real life. But people in these games do not behave in the way they would in real life. No. So it's just a nonsense.
I ain't teabagging, are you, in real life? Ain't got time for that.
So I think it does just sell the whole experience. But yeah, it's interesting they added that co-op element, because I'd be surprised at how many people would want people like me. Like, even in, going back to Minecraft, when we've tried to play that together, I've got TNT buildings being put underneath what I'm doing. So there's always going to be sabotage, as I'd call it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. You should go back to the State of Decay, though. So I assume you played, and I recall that you played the original, right? You wouldn't have played State of Decay 2 without playing State of Decay 1. Ronnie wouldn't allow it.
No, yeah, I did play State of Decay. The original.
That was a very much more of a base game, wasn't it? If I remember, it was kind of like an indie developed thing that everyone got hyped about.
Yeah, I can't remember the timeline, but there was obviously Microsoft bought Undead Labs, and I can't remember when they bought them, but I think it was shortly after or shortly before the original State of Decay come out. That's my memory of it.
Yeah.
Anyways, well, I had my eye on this game for ages. I didn't play it until 2014, so it took me a while to get to it. I feel like it came out either 2008 or 2005. I mean, it was originally a 360 game. I'll look it up in a second. But yeah, so the original got played, and the original wasn't quite what I was after. In that, when the game launched, it initially was. It's more story based than guess what I was expecting.
Walking Dead simulator.
Yeah, it wasn't very random in terms of like the survivors are already pre-baked in all this stuff. I mean, it was okay. I mean, the game ran like fucking dog shit. I do remember that. And that old PC weren't up to it probably, but it was a real stinker. It was just so scruffy, so rough around the edges, ran like garbage. And although I enjoyed it for what it was, it clearly had a lot of deficiencies that meant that the DLCs that came after it, there was another story-based one called Lifeline. And then eventually they added what they called a quote-unquote a sandbox mode called Breakdown, which was, had no story content. It's just about surviving for as long as you can, and then eventually resetting the map, and it would be in a harder difficulty under the guise of you fixing this RV van and escaping the city. But then you come back to the same one each time. It was a bit strange. They didn't have more than one map. So, and I remember seeing those, thinking actually that Breakdown sounds like something that I should be getting involved with. But by that time, I was kind of over it all. I was like, well, it was what it was. Then when State of Decay 2 came out. I mean, from my memories, it got absolutely crapped on in the reviews. Like, scored like 60 odd and 70s, and I was just like, look, there's plenty to be getting on with in 2018, the year of Spider-Man and all that, God of War and all this stuff. Like at that point, I kind of moved on to it. I kept an eye on it because I was like, this maybe has potential if they decide to keep supporting it and patching it and whatever. And patch it, they have. They've added a ton of stuff. Now, I can't attest to what the game was like in 2018. I've got no experience of it. But what I can say today is, over 50 patches later, dozens of content drop, dozens of reworks of systems and community feedback. They are still doing stuff to this day, working on this game, whilst State of Decay 3 is in development. And it's now at a standard where it's probably much improved. So those kind of those static timeline reviews from back in the day, whilst were accurate, I think nowadays is a much more polished product here. Many more features, better onboarding, systems have been ironed out, communities kind of said this is what works, this is what doesn't work. They've got all the data, all the telemetry, and they've listened to it. And I had decided to just take a little walk around their Discord and their Reddit board to see what the kind of sentiment was, and it is very positive. Like, a lot of people are very high on what they've done since the base game's come out, and they've listened to the community. They're still listening. They've got a wish list up for people, and seemingly the players that are still engaged with it at the moment are happy with the direction it's going. So whether that's how accurate that is or not, obviously is difficult to actually say, but it seems like the support has been at least appreciated by the core fan base that's left there. And there's a fair old amount of content here as well. So it's by no means what it was in 2018. It still kind of has a ceiling, I think, in terms of its overall presentation. And that might mean on a quality front, people kind of sneer it and go, yeah, it's kind of looks a bit rough, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, it does. It does look a bit rough still. But it's all about the systems and the gameplay, and I guess this sandbox gameplay as to whether it's gonna be able to stand out. There's 3 modes. Okay, basically there's this daybreak mode, which is basically survive 7 waves with 3 other people online. I didn't play that, not interested. Well, I looked through one playthrough. It takes 45 minutes, and yeah, it's just waves of zombies. You have a wall to protect. They can get through the wall. They attack your technician. If the technician dies, you go back to the beginning, and you earn these prestige points, which you can use in the legacy mode to unlock certain items, which is a bit strange, I think. Doesn't make any contextual sense, which I think annoyed me initially. But generally, I weren't going to play that mode because that's one you want to play with 3 others that you know. You go into that Destiny trying to play a fucking raid with randoms. You know what the outcome's going to be. It's not going to be good for anyone involved.
Yeah.
You got Heartlands, which was added at a later date. This is more like the original State of Decay in that it's a story mode that leans on the State of Decay 2 mechanics. So you have a start and a finish to the story if you work through the missions, and it obviously incorporates all the survival elements of the base game. Then you've got, people call this the campaign, or it's under like Define Your Legacy, where it's the sandbox mode mostly, where you can choose to go through the tutorial and pick starting characters, and then from there onwards you can add people to your base and to your community, or you can pick 3 random characters, start on a random map, or choose your map and do all that stuff, and go through the same process but with a bit more of a no hand-holding. Eventually, essentially, you're dropped in there to kind of deal with it all. So they're the 3 modes on offer. And I thought I'd just get that out there in case any of that piqued your interest. Frightened him. He doesn't like zombies, so...
No, I don't. I think it's interesting that they've got some different modes and stuff going on. That mode, that daybreak thing, sounds a bit... don't like the idea of stuff being linked back to the game, but I'm guessing, you just wanted to stick to the story mode largely and did that.
I prefer, having played both the modes, I prefer the sandbox campaign mode than Heartlands, which is the story mode. Now, what's clever or cool about the Heartlands mode is it's set on the original map of the first one and has characters come back, and it has its own there's a little saga basically going on in that area they've just decided to create. But the trouble with it is, because everything's pre-baked in terms of the characters you meet and the survivors that you meet and the people that you can add to your community, if for whatever reason you lose one of them, they're gone for good. And the way in which that game is structured is that the kind of specialties that some of these survivors bring allow you to unlock base upgrades that you can't access until you've got them in your community. But if you lose them, you lose access to it. So you can end up locking yourself out of quite significant upgrades. Now, to be fair, now I've gone through it once, I'm less inclined to worry about failing because I've gone through and experienced the story. But that first playthrough is quite tense because I didn't want to lose anyone and leave myself with an impossible task towards the back end. And also there's always that feeling that the campaign or the sandbox mode has all the trappings that Heartlands has. It's just that you haven't got this, these missions to do if you don't want to, and it's much more random. You have this curveball mechanic that's implemented into it, which means random modifiers, either good or bad, can happen in the game for an amount of time. Like, it might make the zombies more squishy suddenly because there's been a mutation, or it might make them explode on impact. There's all these weird, strange things that can happen during that mode that keep that mode fresh. The survivors that you meet, other than on a certain map, are all randomised as far as I can tell. The enclaves that you meet, the missions are random, but they're normally rehashed versions of them. But you're still with new people, with different people perhaps to recruit to your base. So for me, that's where the long-term play of the game will come. Because I will go back to this. It'll be one of those games that, if I've got a couple of weeks between releases of a game or I'm waiting for something, I'll boot this up and go back into that campaign, I think, and just start a community and just see how far I get and be done with it. The campaign does have an ending, though. You can work towards a goal. You can work towards clearing down the map of these plague hearts, which are infesting basically the map, and then you can elect a leader into your community, and each character has their kind of view of how the community should be run. You've got like a warlord who's very much like, look, you shoot on sight other survivors, you don't make friends. You've got a trader who wants to make friends and whatnot. You've got a builder who wants to build a self-sustained community. You've got a sheriff who's wants to be the law basically, but hand out justice and whatnot. And they then have their own, depending on who you select as a leader, they will have a number of missions and an end game. Once you've completed that, you can go back in with your community and continue it, or you can move to another map and carry on there, or you can basically save them down and say that's it, that's their story done, and start a new one. So you can play it as endlessly as you want, or you can play it through to getting these legacies done, whether it's a sheriff, a trader, a builder, or a warlord, and at that point, bin the community or save them down in what they call a legacy pool, just so they're there for reference. So there is an element of things to be getting on with even in the sandbox mode, but I guess it's less pressing because there's no real story to be worried about at that point. It's not
do what you like, do it your own pace.
Yeah, exactly.
Chizzy, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, interesting. So when we'd spoke, it might have been on a podcast, might even be on the podcast that's just preceded this. Who knows? I don't. Do you? Definitely. It's definitely not on that one, is it? 'Cause that's out.
Yeah.
So when we spoke on that previous podcast about this, you talked to your frustrations with the tutorial mode.
Yeah.
And how that affected your gameplay, if you like, or your experience of the game.
Don't teach you the fucking game.
Well, they added it, though, for you. You don't want it.
This toilet. It'll get you in a pickle. Because really, what you do... The loop... The game is that you've got a load of resources in this base. They whittle down, unless you've got facilities in your base that don't whittle them down. So say, for example, you build something like a farm that's going to make you food. Your food levels won't whittle down if you've got... if you don't have loads of people nicking it all and eating it every day. But really, the aim of the game is when you land in there, the first thing you want to do is go out and scavenge and build up your resource repository. So you want materials, you want medicine, you want food, you want ammunition. And you can store at the beginning, I think, 25 of each of those. And usually, if you've got 4 people in your survival camp, you lose 4 food a day. So if you get 25 of them, you can last a week, basically. You ain't got to worry about food for another week. But the way in which the tutorial works is, rather than teaching you to build up a repository at the very beginning so you can then do other interesting things, it's like, go and destroy this plague cart immediately. And you're like, well, all right, we'll go and do that. But let's teach you about the plague infection, which is important. That, I must say, it does teach you what the plague blood infection is and how to deal with that, because that is important, because that will kill survivors if you ain't got the education to deal with that. Essentially, certain zombies carry this infection. If they hit you enough times, you'll become infected, and that survivor will die unless you get a cure to them in the timer that's left. And you can pause the time by putting them in an infirmary and doing it. Teaches you that, so that is important. I'm not going to nullify that. But after that's been taught, it should be like, right, now spend the next hour building up your repository. Don't know where to look? Oh, here, look, go on the map and highlight a certain house, and it will show you what materials might be there, whether it's food, medicine, building, whatever. It should teach them. It doesn't. It goes, right, go and speak to this fucking bloke down the road. They need help. All right, there's a plague cart nearby. Go and destroy that. Oh, do you want to recruit them? You're like, all right. Then before you know it, you got fucking... How many people? You got 4 people in there. You got no farm coming in. You got 4 food a day blasting out of your camp, and you got no foundation there.
It doesn't teach resource management, essentially.
No, I mean, it says watch out for it, but it doesn't really. I mean, I thought, I don't know, I just thought, what am I doing wrong here? And it wasn't until I sort of went on YouTube, was like, what's what's going on here? I was watching this guy called Brian Menard, and he was like, so best thing to do is go out and get all your resources, and you haven't got to worry about it. And I was like, of course, that's logical. But when you're putting a game and going through the tutorial and the training wheels, you can't just go through the motions thinking it's going to look after me, but it absolutely wasn't. And what I'd say is people that are new to this, don't lean on that too much. Think logically about what's going on, because it's okay to not do the mission straight away. Now, once you get out of the tutorial and the random missions start popping up, a lot of them are time critical if you want to do them. They will just fade off. Time becomes an actual resource, which is an interesting way of doing it. A lot of games won't, will they? Be like, well, that offer from that enclave will be there for 6 weeks. They're like, well, you got half a day, roughly. And if you don't go over to them, they're like, well, fuck you then. You ain't going to help us, are you? And
get someone else in.
Yeah, exactly. And then they might have a negative attitude towards you and actually become hostile if you keep blowing it with them. But again, yeah, so that tutorial, it teaches you some, I guess, fundamental stuff, but the real basic loop, it doesn't do a good job of doing. So I found myself in a right old state, basically, after about 5 hours. Didn't really understand a lot of the core mechanics of how to collect resources. You know, simple things like take another survivor with you, fill up your bag, then switch to them to fill up their bag, then bring a car with you also, fill up the trunk. Like, do all this stuff to be efficient. At no point does it even give you an inkling of that's a good way of doing it. So
yeah, I can't think of any specifics right now, but I definitely have played games where it's like you've given me some knowledge, but you haven't imparted the basics on me. No, like normally, but it's a tricky balance because sometimes you feel like you're going through a tutorial and you're like, yeah, I know, yeah. So it sometimes is a bit tricky, but I agree. I'd much rather with these sort of games just build up a repository and go, right, I don't have to worry about that. I'll do that again in a week.
Yeah.
I'll worry about it then.
I mean, that's the logical way to do it, but for whatever reason, I was expecting the tutorial to that
really
be part of it,
or
perhaps I couldn't do it. I didn't really understand, but once you know, didn't you? I guess so. Don't be getting too snarled up in that tutorial is my suggestion.
Yeah. So essentially, summary so far is that you prefer the sandboxy mode than that story mode purely because you can do what you want to do and survive how you want to survive. A bit more free, a bit more random, a bit more like the experience that you're after.
Yeah, it's much more dynamic than what that is because there's nothing really dynamic that happens in that story mode because they can't really. I mean, yes, there are random spawns of zombies and powerful zombies, and if they spawn a fucking 3 juggernauts outside your base, you're going to have trouble dealing with that. So that can happen, but you won't just get random people reaching out to you unless it's for a story purpose or something like that. So you don't really have to worry about too much in that sense. You just kind of work through the missions. You build up your repositories and your base like you normally would. It's just that there is a start and an end to the story that you can just follow through. And look, lore-wise, it's somewhat interesting to kind of understand what's going on with this blood plague and all this other stuff, and interesting to see what's happening to Tumble Valley, as it's called. And then there's just a follow-up on that. That's called Heartlands. In the campaign mode, so the sandbox mode, you can go on to Tumble Valley, and that actually has characters from the story mode in there that has its own unique set of side missions if you want to do them. So if you want to take it a step further and find out a bit more of what happened after Heartlands and where those characters ended up, you can do that while still doing the sort of full sandbox thing. So that's quite a nice. I wish all the maps had their own side stories, if you will, like that. And they don't. That's the only one that has it. So I think in a future entry, that would be something cool that each of the. You can turn it on or off because again, if you've done it once, you don't want to be doing it again. I guess that probably would get boring. But you still have the randomness, but you also have these other sort of scattered around survivors and enclaves to get in touch with. So that's quite a cool thing to have tied in. And I said that's like a saga. That place, it's just always trouble lurking there. So interested to check in to see what's happening post Heartlands.
It always is. So is there anything other than the tutorial that you specifically dislike about this game that you want to call out?
I mean, I don't know about dislike. I mean, it is a bit janky. Like, it is scruffy. Like, it goes to hell sometimes, and you're like, well, I'm not sure how much I'm in control of getting out of this, or whether the game's just gonna fucking pummel me. Which I suppose adds to the stakes of it all, which is important. You want it to be high stakes.
Yeah.
But it does feel a little bit. You watch someone play it and you play. You think it's a little bit messy. This game, it's fine, but it's not very smooth and whatnot. It's not unplayable. It's perfectly sound, but we're not talking Last of Us 2 levels of smoothness and fidelity. Like it is what it is. It's a £25 UK game that's sitting on Game Pass and was clearly not targeted towards a premium offering. But it comes with those sort of concessions that you might expect of a game that was budgeted and for sale at a lower price. And I got a follower killed once, and I was fuming. And was that my fault? Probably was. In fact, the game, it does punish you when you start getting careless. That's one thing I noticed. You think you know it all, and you think, well, I'll just deal with these. Instead of just doing one one plague heart, which are not hard, but they can get hairy because it starts spawning tutting when you start attacking it. But generally, you can handle it. So rather than just doing one at a time, that's the safe way to do it, conservative. Let's do one, go back, restock, maybe send another survivor out. I was like, there's only 2 left. I'll do the last 2 together. And then on the second one, my follower the doctor that I very rarely pulled out on missions like this, again, didn't think I needed to have any sort of major power there. She ended up getting killed, and I was like, I've really cost her there. Yeah, I was like, that's just an example of just getting careless and greedy. Yeah, you've just got to be laser focused and conservative, which is how you'd imagine it would be. In a zombie survival, you can't be just going out there going, we're going to do this, this, and this. It's like, right, we've got one thing today. Let's go and get food. Let's go and get that, fill up, and get out of there. No point fucking about unless we need to. So it does have that element there, sort of just baked into the game experience, because it can all go to shit quite quickly. And if you're not stocked up and repaired and all that stuff, you're going to have a horrible time trying to get out of some of these scrapes.
I suppose that's a good thing. Although it's frustrating at times. You go, well, chuff that. But
that's part of the game. It's permadeath. So that's the hook of it as well, is that these people can die and they're gone. So that doctor didn't get to see it through to the end. And I was like, cool, one of the OGs put down because of my careless leadership, really. That's what it came down to. And that was self-preservation. I got in a state inside this house, got all snarled up and just got out of there.
Come get me.
When I'm getting out of it, because my health was right. I already had one real scare in there, and I got him out of there. And I looked back, and she was getting attacked by this zombie, and I was like, let me just heal up or something. By the time I'd started doing that, it was like, she's been ripped in half. And I was like, just got in my car and drove off. No, somber journey back.
got back, and everyone, where's so-and-so? You went,
gone.
She got careless.
Yeah, it was her fault, wasn't it? But that was fun in hindsight. At the time, I was a bit worried, but you just recruit someone else and replace them. Yeah.
Forgotten about already.
Although she was a doctor, so she had certain skills and buffs that our medical thing couldn't get again unless we found another doctor, and I never did. So, yeah, it was interesting. I played through one of the Legacies, so this is I played through the Builder one, which is fine. It really just they're not great. That one wasn't great, I should say. I don't know about the others, but it kind of just rushed itself towards a conclusion, which I found strange. I won't go into why. I just thought that it felt like it was, here's the final mission, so we haven't set this up very well, so here's all this turn. And it wasn't that it was hard, just a lot of things suddenly happened in a short space of time, and I was like, this is not even making sense at this point. So I don't know if it was a bug or something, but it was all a bit strange the way that kind of just escalated and then got to the final mission. But they're not, they are there for a light story element, I guess, for people, but nothing really to write home about in that sense.
Fair enough. Is there anything else you want to call out about this before we move on?
The game constantly auto-saves, so you're not in. So if someone does die, it pretty much saves immediately after. So if you want to, there's no. Well, you could technically just turn it off if you get in a spot of bother. I think you can get away with that, but I don't know why you would do that and not play it. But there's no save slots, so I think it would be nice to have just saved a certain state of my community and left them as they were. But on the other hand, I think for the game it kind of needs to have that brutality. There's one save
finality to it, where it's just like, this is the one. If you fuck it up, then that's the save done. Yeah,
it needs to have that. But I mean, the curveball stuff is interesting. Each individual character, as I said, is outside of the story modes and the tutorial, they're randomized in terms of their stats, traits, buffs, debuffs. They're random rolls essentially, which means every time you pick up and play, you're going to have a different kind of starting group. You level up certain actions by carrying out that action. So shooting levels up the more you shoot. Running levels up, or your cardio levels up the more you sprint. So I like that. I always enjoy that level of, progression. It's based on what you do with the characters. Each of the characters will have favoured types of weapons that gives them little, I guess, buffs on their accuracy or their power, depending on what they prefer. Some of them are more valuable than others. You can find people that are like skilled soldiers that gives like passive buffs to the rest of the group. There's all this under the hood stuff that's really interesting to dig into. So overall it's got a lot of guts to it now, I think, and it kind of scratched this itch that I didn't really know existed until I started it, and I was like, oh dear, I really am getting sucked into this. I really am. And I knew this was an itch that was there from years ago. Thought I'd kind of just shook my head away thinking there's nothing really that's going to be quite good enough to scratch the itch. But State of Decay 2 is just on the level where it's there. Going back to what I said earlier, I'll be looking to play this in my downtime, just as a casual game. A stream game, I could chuck it onto Game Pass PC and stream it. That might be fun. Put it on a hard lethal. There's a lot there. And I'm looking forward to finishing off my next project, my next game, and then sort of going back to this in the downtime and having a bit more fun with it. Now that I've kind of experienced most of the story stuff, it's like I can just set off and enjoy it and see what dynamic stories come out.
Oh, it's interesting to hear. I always thought this would... It is Walking Dead simulator in a lot of way, and it kind of appeals to a lot of people's interests. But as you say, I think everyone was just so down on it after it got released because it did come out in a bit of a state by the sounds of things. Yeah. Unusual for Microsoft.
This is one of the reasons why they started getting crapped on. So and I'm looking forward to what they do with 3. Although that's had development trouble, I know that. And so I don't know how that's going to come out. I know there's been some controversy at the studio potentially about leadership and whatnot. I mean, originally State of Decay was supposed to be MMO style, and I'm so glad that Undead Labs realised they couldn't do it or didn't want to do it, because just having a more polished single player offline thing where you can invite your friends in, for me, is personally we've got enough online to it. I don't think it's got to have this online element to it of random. Put the randomness in the game and let us just fuck about on these 5 maps that you've got. You've got plenty of different variety there to go and play on the other maps. So, it was surprisingly pleasing, this game, albeit with a level of scruffiness that is not what you'd expect from a truly polished. Yeah, not ideal, but it's kind of. There's no really alternatives anyway, so it's like it or lump it.
The ultimate zombie survival experience.
And they probably are. It probably is.
Yeah.
To that
What a damning indictment that is, potentially. But okay. Well, let's go into the gaming gallery, your gaming gallery.
Yeah.
Potential to chuck it in the bin still as we walk in. But I don't get the feeling we're going that way. I get a feeling that we're going into the gallery. And it feels like a matter of where. So, especially if you're going back to it. If you're going back to it, it don't get in the gallery, then queries need to be made. So,
yes.
Where does State of Decay 2 Juggernaut Edition go?
It's going to get itself a lovely, proud bronze rating.
Yeah.
Just where it needs to be. Well above any sort of binning recommendation. Just probably not quite enough polish to go further up, but super enjoyable. Clearly not for everyone. Clearly not for 10 million people. 10 million logons in it. It's not. We know about that engagement stat, but there's definitely a community there that love what they've got here, and I can kind of see why. And it's kind of made me a believer in. Strangely enough, I'm like, this is probably one of my favourite things that Microsoft have had out, and it's been sitting there for half a decade, or if not more. So pleased to have finally got round to it, and yeah, I'm going back, and bronze to me seems like a fair kind of rating for it, and ranking. It's good. It's great in some ways. It's falls short in some areas, but overall, the package is an enjoyable video game for those that are interested in that type of video game. The ultimate zombie survival experience.
There you go.
Themselves. So that's it. State of Decay 2 Juggernaut Edition earns itself a bronze. We'll be back with some idle game chat very, very soon. But there's nothing more for us to say here other than thanks for your time and ta-da.